Good evening and welcome to tonight's Facebook Live on elemental intelligence. And first of all, an apology for the fact that we had to cancel last week. Hi Sonia, hi Amanda, hi Bronwyn. We couldn't keep going last week because I had a terrible head and couldn't even think straight. So now we've got Anita, Sarupa, Karen, Marianne, Juliet, Eri. What we have is an interesting situation. Hi Doris, because last week we had a typhoon. Well, we had a hurricane in America. Hi Crystal, hi Julie, hi Clara. We had a typhoon in America and then hurricane, and then we had this horrendous typhoon to hit Asia. Hi Tracy, Jackie, Sharon, goodness, Ola. And sometimes when we're sensitive, we can be affected by the thoughts and the energies of others. Hi Cynthia, hi Glennis. Nice to have you join us. Fionnuala too. So last Monday I had an appalling headache. I couldn't think, I couldn't function. In fact, it lasted most of the week. And tonight we're doing the Facebook Live and there's another typhoon building in Asia. So there's no coincidence that that's happening at the same time. Elemental intelligence is how we balance the energies within ourselves, the air and the water particularly, because our thoughts and our emotions determine whether we're in balance. It's very well known that how we feel, for example, stress, can affect our blood pressure. And so our ability to feel aligned, our ability to feel effective can be badly thrown off balance if we're not elementally aligned within. And so it can come from within us, but it can also come from external factors. Hi Yumiko, nice of you to be here. So if we are aware of that balance, that internal balance, then as we go about our day-to-day lives, we're sharing that balance with all those we encounter. If we're not, if we're sitting thinking and we're stewing about something, or we're feeling afraid and we want to go and hide in a corner, all of that energy we are transmitting, because we are transmitters. We're receivers, but we're also transmitters. So we're sending all of that energy out into the world. If you look at what's happening in the world at the moment, there's a lot of unrest, there's a lot of dis-ease, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of fear. And lo and behold, we see the air and the water working together. So I've got some questions for tonight's Facebook Live that people have kindly sent in. The first come from Karen in Hong Kong. And she says, how best to embrace fear or resolve fear? For example, so she wrote this at the time of the typhoon. For example, the winds were howling loudly today, and in that space I'm feeling a bit fearful, wondering if the typhoon might pop the air conditioner indoors or if the windows would shatter. Now that's an awful feeling to have, that even in your own home you feel at the mercy of the elements. And if you look at how that typhoon ravaged Asia, you can see the power of that energy at play. So practically speaking, one could move to a place with no windows, of course. However, how can one embrace and resolve such a fear? Because obviously if you're in the middle of a frightening experience and you're frightened, you're adding your emotions to what's occurring. And is it also ultimately about having no fear of death? And does the route the typhoon take have to do with how much mental energy is put out and needs to be balanced? They're three really good questions because they're about how we impact our world and how our world as a result reflects that impact back to us. And that's what the typhoon is, a reflection of that impact back to us. So how do you resolve fear? How do you embrace it? First of all, you acknowledge it. You acknowledge that I'm in a situation and I don't feel safe. Okay, because until you acknowledge it, you can't do anything about it. Once you've acknowledged that you don't feel safe, then it's about asking yourself what you could do for you in that moment that would help you to trust. You know, I used to be terrified of the dark until I was about 35. And that's because as a child I used to see spirit and it frightened me, so I shut down. And when we shut down, what happens is that psychic energy has nowhere to go. So the balance between our thoughts and our emotions is in a kind of potential battle for supremacy. Whereas when the energy flows, we're at peace because we are allowing who we are and our connection to all that is to operate. So I used to be terrified of the dark. In fact, if I had to get up to go to the bathroom at night, I'd wake my husband to go with me. I found that for me, saying a mantra helped. So what is it that you could say to yourself that acknowledges that you're afraid and yet it's okay? Because it is okay to be afraid. Fear helps us to understand something that we may be hiding from ourselves. So we embrace that fear by acknowledging it and then looking at what we can do to help ourselves move through it. Is it also about having no fear of death? Well, possibly. I'm not afraid of dying because I've tried 3 times and they've sent me back. So obviously I'm a spiritual reject. But it's also more probably the fear of the unknown. The very fact that it's called the unknown means that we don't know anything about it and our mind struggles with that. The route that the typhoon takes is directly related to the amount of energy being directed towards that path. So if you look over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of judgment of Russia and China. And the typhoon swirls and builds somewhere away from the focus, but then gradually that energy is drawn to where that focus is. That's something to think about. There's been a lot of unsettled energy around Hong Kong for a while now. There's been a lot of uncertainty in the Philippines. If you look at China, there's been a lot of criticism of China. So it's important that we stop and consider what we're actually putting out there when we're being undisciplined in our thinking. Orla says, John spoke of return to innocence. Is the teaching on the elemental intelligence the practical steps to support that return? Yes, it is. And that's a good point. Yes, it is. So would one way to work with this, she asks, be when feeling anger, switch to inspiration by focusing on the salamanders? Yes and no. Because let's face it, when we're angry, we're angry. Can you just imagine yourself in the middle of a really heated moment saying, oh, just a moment, I've got to think of the salamanders? We don't. But the moment the anger settles, then we can. And if you can do it, if you can catch yourself in the middle of the anger, then great. At that point, ask to be connected not to the salamanders, ask to be connected to your own guides and teachers to help you diffuse the anger. Because if you connect to the salamanders whilst you're angry, they're going to feel your anger. They don't need that. So connect to your guides and teachers and ask that you can dissolve that anger, diffuse it, then connect to the salamanders and look for inspiration to resolve what's making you angry. That would be a perfect way to do it, yes. Self-pity is water, she says. Judgment is air. Stubbornness is earth. Yes. So if we identify what the things are that are out of balance within us, and we always know, we tell ourselves we don't, but we do. Once we identify what's out of balance within us, and we ask to diffuse, for help to diffuse that energy, then we can connect to the relevant elemental beings to ask them to help us develop what will bring us more and more into balance totally. So thanks for that, Ola. Bronwyn says, how and why is it that typhoons are affecting certain parts of the world? Well, I think we've already covered that, so that's okay. Is it that? What she's saying is it just that, or is it that she's not seeing how it's affecting where she lives? Well, yeah, it is. But the energy will present itself in more than one ways. In some places, it's going to be very dramatic. In other places, it's going to be a little bit more subtle, depending on what's occurring at the time. So, in what way is that energy affecting the whole? We are here to shine light. In order to shine light fully, we need to balance our personality and our soul. We need to be in alignment with all that is. In being in alignment with all that is, what we radiate is balance and harmony, which supports and enhances the elementals and the work that they do in our world. When we are not in balance and harmony within ourselves, we're transmitting that energy out every second of every day. Meditation helps us to bring balance. What do we do with the times when we're not meditating? I'd suggest that when you come out of your meditation, you ask to be shown how to maintain that state of ease and grace all of the time, because your guides and your teachers will help you to do that. You ask, please help me to sustain this. A few of us got together before tonight's Facebook Live to do a meditation to send energy through the grid into the world because of this typhoon that's building. That's something else that you might do. You might take a few minutes each day just to send energy. Those of you who may not know, we do that Harmony 21, the 21st of the month. We get together and we send that energy. There's lots of ways. You know, Sonia says set up personal bubbles so that it won't affect anyone. Yes, you can. However, that's not stopping yourself when you get out of balance and bringing you back. What you're saying is, now that the stable door's open, let's try and stop the horse from bolting. Putting yourself in a personal bubble is great. Being aware of how you impact every second of every day, everyone you meet and people you might never meet, is also something to consider, because that's true service. They're the questions that people sent me. Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask while we're on this topic? Because it's really important that we understand how we affect people around us and start to take responsibility for the energy that we put into the world. If we want to change the world, we need to do something at a personal level to make that happen. So it doesn't look as though anyone's got any questions about this. So how about I throw a little challenge into the pot? How about, oh, before I give you that, I've got two questions. Will sitting in a park help us, help us to balance the energy on the day of a typhoon? Why only do it on the day of a typhoon? Yes, it will, but why only do it on the day of a typhoon? How do we maintain our balance, Haresh asks, in the face of uncertainty? There's nothing wrong with being uncertain. I acknowledge it. I'm not quite certain what to do here, but it's okay. That's how you maintain your balance. Because if we're allowing our guidance to guide us, we won't know where we're going until we arrive. We may think so, but we don't. And you know, the best way I've found to maintain my balance is to stop wondering where I'm going and to just put one foot in front of the other, to keep taking the next step. Sarupa says, would you suggest using the meditations you've shared about water and air as a regular practice as the energy of the moment, as the energy at the moment with air and water is really intense? Yes, absolutely. There's been a couple of meditations that I've shared recently that could help with that. But then don't forget, if you only do the two on air and water, you're then going to be out of balance with earth and fire. It's tricky, isn't it, to get it right? That's because it's not about getting it right, it's about doing what you're guided to do. Sonia says, what about Japan has a typhoon and earthquake one after the other? Do we contribute to that? Of course we do. You can't say, I live here so I've only contributed to this. Everything we send out affects everything on the planet. Why is it one after the other with Japan? Because Japan has been in many ways a country that's helped us to learn. I've said it before and I'll say it again. After Fukushima, Japan was the only country that publicly recorded a video to say thank you to the international community for the help that was given. Got very little coverage, and yet it was a very important thing. Japan is a place of structure. Some might say rigidity, because everything is very clear and organized to the second, so that's Earth. And sometimes if Earth is that rigid, you need an earthquake to shake it up a little bit and to try to see what else can be done. But don't forget that it's not all about punishment. Sometimes it's about the fact that the land itself needs to breathe and needs to grow. And so things will happen to enable that to occur. I would suggest, Sonia, that you meditate on Japan and find out what your guides and teachers will tell you about it. Clara asks, will taking a deep breath help calm the emotions? Absolutely. You know, when I was growing up, we were told, take a deep breath and count to 10 and then speak. And that's great because it stops you expressing hastily. And by the time you've counted to 10, you've probably thought a better way of saying it. It doesn't necessarily stop your thoughts in the moment, but it's a great exercise. It's a great thing to do. Elaine says, could you speak a little about how to recall the energy you may have unleashed? That's really simple. If you feel that you've lost it for a moment, however you've lost it, the moment you realize you've done it, take a moment and just close your eyes, breathe in 3 deep breaths, and then ask that you recall the energy that you've sent out, that as it comes through your bubble, surrounded by the blue flame heals that energy. And then you can take an extra step and you can surround whoever you've sent that energy to in pink, or you can just follow it with pink bubbles. That's a good way. Anita, so we seem to notice the environmental stuff like rubbish, but not notice our thought footprint and emotional footprint. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, if I had $1 for every time somebody said to me, I got so emotional about that, but I'm feeling okay now, and don't go on to say, and so this is what I've chosen to do so it doesn't happen again, I'd be a very rich lady. Because it's not just about being in balance. If you want to sustain balance, it's about looking at what upsets your balance in the first place. So what's behind that? What's behind the judgment, the criticism, the fear? What is it that creates that misstep that knocks you off balance? When you understand that and you address it, it's not just saying, oh, well, it's because I've got a fear of heights. What is it? And what, therefore, can you do about it? It's like me using a mantra. I'm not afraid of the dark. I can walk anywhere in the dark now and it doesn't worry me, and it hasn't for a long time. But that's because I took responsibility for the fear and took responsibility for finding a resolution that worked for me. Might not work for anybody else, but it worked for me. And that's what I'm suggesting that you look for. Ways to work with yourself to understand, so that you're not continually the mouse on the wheel going round and round in circles, going through emotions. Anita says the equinox meditation is amazing. Thank you. That's for the Harmony 21 group. And Fionola says, if everything around us is breaking down or not working, is that about our own elemental imbalance or also about the energy being sent to where we are? I don't mean in a weather event, but general chaos. Traffic lights going out, lifts jamming. Okay, traffic lights going out and lifts jamming is mental energy. It's computer driven, it's mental energy. Usually the weather is emotional energy. That's a very simplistic way to define it, but that's how it is. So you might be feeling imbalanced, but the people around you might not. It's the accumulation that causes the impact. But if you are in balance within yourself, I'll guarantee the lift you get onto will work. The traffic lights you approach will work. They won't work for the person behind you if that person's part of that mass consciousness that's stirring everything up. That's a good point, Fionnuala. So our own elemental imbalance is where it begins. If it's to be, it begins with me. If I want to feel imbalanced, then I need to take responsibility for what I can do to make that align. But after that, it's looking at what we're sending out into the world and how that's impacting other people and their lives and their livelihoods. Ultimately, it's about kindness, and that's something I've talked about for a long time. Kindness. So, as always, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you've got something useful out of tonight. The challenge, go with the challenge of trying to maintain a sense of equilibrium for as long as possible. So try for 5 minutes a day, not counting your meditation because that's cheating, but try it for 5 minutes a day and then see if you can expand it to 10 and then to 15 and then to 20. Okay, I hope you have a fantastic time and I'll talk to you next time. Good night.